Hello everybody! This problem was about vocabulary, which is important to learn because if you don't know these common terms that all programmers use, then the next time you look something up on Stack Overflow or you try and teach something to yourself, you're going to immediately become confused because these are words that just permeate all talk about programming. Alright, so it says use the vocabulary list above. Above? Above where? Oh, problems start here. If you scroll up here, the vocabulary list was right here at the top of the problem set. So just for convenience, I'm going to copy it and paste it down here so we can look at it as we're talking. So here's the terms you should know. Class, object, field, instance variable, method, getter method, setter method, client code, instance, instantiate, and constructor. All right, well, how do we know about what these things mean? This paragraph illustrates their use because all these terms refer to things that you already know about. So a class, that's your definition for a new type of object. So it's like a blueprint that defines the thing. It defines facts about your object. So those are the fields or the instance variables. And it defines behaviors for your object, which are the methods. You never run the code in your class directly. That's what a program with a main method would be for. Instead, like I said, the class is like a blueprint for what does it mean to be a certain kind of object. Instead, another class with a main method is used to create new objects. We call those instances of your class. And a program which uses another class in that way is sometimes called a client class or client code. So let's take a look at a specific example. Here was my little reminder section. So here it says public class dog. So dog is the name of the class, and it defines a new type of object called the dog object. You can think of this as being a new data type. The variables here at the top are known as fields or instance variables. These are the facts that describe the dog, so the name and the food level and the happiness level. Here, this method whose name is the same as the class name is called the constructor, and its job is to create a new dog object. Instead of using the term object, which is a little bit ambiguous, let's use the term instance. So if I have 3 dog objects, you could say I have 3 instances of the dog class. So here you see on the right you have the same copy of the dog class from before. On the left is a program called main. It has a main method. So this is code that would actually run. Here in this code we run the dog constructor to create a new instance of dog. So here D is the variable that holds the dog instance. If we wanted to use that as a verb, you'd use the verb instantiate. So the constructor is instantiating a new dog instance. And then of course we can run methods. Here it looks like I'm running a display state method and then a run method and then a speak method a little bit later on. There are 2 very important kinds of methods that most objects have. They're called getter methods and setter methods. Here's the idea. The idea is you've defined a new type of object, for example, a point object using your point class. Those objects have variables. They have fields. They have instance variables. So for point, we've got an x and a y. Well, what happens if in your client code you create a point and then later on you want to change a variable that's inside your point object? Because x and y are inside the point object, if you're over here in a completely different class, you can't just access x and y directly. You have to ask your point object to access the point's variables. So here, the point of a setter method is you're going to tell your point object p that you'd like its x value to have a new value. So here I'm giving 200 as an input to this method, and then that input gets assigned to the instance variable. So in that way, it's kind of like the constructor, only the constructor initializes the variables for the first time, and a setter method would assign a new value anytime later. A getter method is just the reverse. So here in a getter method, this is my client code. It's the tester class. I'm asking my point object, hey point object, what is your x variable? So I run the getX method, which is right here. It's going to return this.x. This refers to the current executing object, so it's returning the field x. And it gets returned back to the client code, and then you can do whatever you want with it. So I think we've covered all these pieces of vocabulary, so now we're ready to answer question 0. You might actually want to pause the video if you didn't do this already, and now that you have had this brief review, try and answer the questions yourself. Okay, fair warning, here we go. So I can blank a new object by calling its blank. Well, I know the word calling is about running a method. So I could say by calling its method, but that's not very specific because there's lots of methods. I could what a new object. So the only verb in here is instantiate. So that must be what's intended here. Instantiate. Okay. All right, so then since this is the only verb, I'm instantiating a new object by calling its what. Well, I know I create a new instance by calling something's constructor. All right, let's see. The information for a blank is stored in its blank, which are also called blank. Well, there's only one thing in the above list which has 2 names. Here I had said, where is it? Right, here I'd said variables, also called fields or instance variables. So that's the only thing that possibly fits. And that fits the rest of the pattern also because it says the information for something is stored in, well, I know I usually store information in variables, right? So these things have to be variables of some kind. So we could say instance variables, which are also called fields. And of course, you could have put those in the other order and that's fine. All right, so the information for so you could say instance. I would also have accepted object here. That's fine. All right, so for the code, if Fido.isAlive, Fido is an example of well, I would say variable, but variable isn't one of the items up here. It's an example of a blank of the dog class. So this must be instance of the dog class. And isAlive is an example of well, it's definitely a method, so that would be okay, but I think an even better answer would be getter method, because it's getting a fact about the dog. It's getting whether or not the dog is alive right now. That's it. I think it's good to practice using these, and that's something that we'll be doing actually during the year. Is one of my goals is to have you guys be able to speak about programming the way that a programmer would, so that way, if you happen to run into a friend of your parents who, is a hiring manager at a company, you can sound like you know what you're talking about, because it's great to sound like you know what you're talking about. And this is one of the ways that you do it. Okay, good luck. I'm going to talk about question 2 next.